Oh shit, let me go get this.
Oh shit. No, I think you had a door. Oh, okay. It's fine.
All right.
Edit that out. Or we
All
can
right.
leave it in.
What up, guys? Welcome back to Dangerous Rhetoric. This is episode 46. We're very happy today to be joined by the very famous problematic thinker, grifter extraordinaire, Gothix. Thank you for joining us, Gothix.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. So excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. So I'm a little newer to your work. I found out about you a few months ago. I think this was probably mid 2021, but you did a debate on your channel between two I can't remember their names. They were scholars of CRT, and you were also joined by Christian Watson. I think it was Karlin Boroshenko and Michael Moreno, who we're also going to have in the show soon.
Nice.
When he gets back to us and locks the day in, but he's definitely coming on. And we've had Christian Walker on. Watson, sorry. He's gonna get mad if he gets like confused. Christian Walker.
Daniel.
So we had him on because of that debate, actually, that I saw that you guys did. And by the end of it, I was like, I need to talk to some of these people. Christian especially impressed us, and we immediately were like, come on our show and talk to us. So ever since then, we've been following your work, following him, and yeah.
Yeah, that debate was a dumpster fire. It was absolutely terrible. I was laughing about this. Well, he's probably going to find out now, but one of those scholars, they had after we had that debate, we had like an after party stream where we just were talking about the debate, but it was for members only. So you had to be a YouTube member in order to see that. So one of those scholars subscribed so they can see what we were talking about. Well, I got the notification 2 days ago that he's been subscribed for 7 months. So I think he forgot to unsubscribe. So thank you for paying my bills.
Nice. Thanks for paying my bills. Was it the pretentious one or like the other one? Because
which one?
I guess Daniel, you're not making distinctions
well,
here.
there was definitely the one with the long hair. I don't remember his name. I just remember him being pretentious. He would laugh at the most like inappropriate moments, like you would be speaking or you would be speaking, and he would just do this arrogant, haughty chuckle in the middle of whatever you were saying. And it reminded me of like every time I would have like a Facebook debate, and when you're going back and forth with someone on Facebook, and instead of them responding to what you're saying with logic or whatever, they just laugh emoji every single like
to
you. And it reminded me of that. I was like, he's just laugh emojiing every single thing that they say. He's not listening.
And I think it was that person.
Wow.
Yeah,
I interacted with him I think once on like Twitter. We got into a little back and forth, but I don't know, I don't follow those people. It's fine. I know some people like to stalk the accounts and YouTubers and stuff that they hate. And
there's this weird thing with online communities and online creators where certain people will kind of have like this negative obsession where they kind of get like obsessed with the creator and they start like sort of digitally stalking or researching. And like, because I saw somebody was talking about Jeremy from The Quartering the other day, and he had like 6 pages of like, why, Jeremy is terrible. And I'm like, dude, you're like doing the same thing that the mainstream media did to Trump in 2016. Like, if you don't like the guy, just don't pay any attention to it.
I think this is a good segue a bit for Gothix to talk about the cycle of insanity.
Yes.
I put a video out a couple months ago where you did a sort of diagram and you described the cycle of insanity. Do you want to maybe talk a bit about what that is?
Yes, absolutely. So the cycle of insanity is essentially this idea that people will assume I have the opinions that I hold because I'm getting paid. They'll say, oh, you're grifting, you're doing this just for money. And the only way that I'm able to actually make money is if people keep supporting me. And how do people support me? It's if people know who I am. So these people that will call me a grifter, they'll become obsessed with me on social media. They'll keep tabs on me. They'll keep talking about me. They'll talk about me on their streams, on their platforms, and they're giving me more publicity, which then puts me in the eyes of people that want to work with me. Like, for last year, I've gone on The Blaze. I've worked for like a show called Rightly AJ. I worked for a bunch of other shows, and this would not have been possible if it wasn't for all of the publicity I've been getting. So they'll keep doing this, and then they'll get upset. Well, look at all of the subscribers she gets. Look at all of the shows that she's on, and they'll keep talking about me, and they don't realize that they're kind of feeding this cycle. And what I learned afterwards is there's another name for this. It's called the Streisand effect.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's the same thing where it's like you try so hard to not bring attention to someone, but because you're so emotionally invested in them, you actually end up bringing attention to them.
Yeah, it's that kind of happened too with the whole Jack Murphy incident too, where it's like something came out, and the more he tried to divert attention away from it, the more attention came onto it. But it's just so crazy because like the people you're talking about, the main thing they do complain about is the attention that people like you get. And what they're not realizing, the insanity of it, is they're giving you the attention they complain about, and then they're helping bring more attention onto you from others by complaining about it.
Right. Yeah. And I've even gotten into little debates with people just out of curiosity. I say, why are you doing this? You know, why day after day you're antagonizing me on social media? What is the purpose of it? Because what you're doing is you're feeding more publicity to me. So what is it doing for you? And I never get an answer. And to me, it just seems like this sort of obsession where some people just don't have anything to do. And so they keep feeding into it. But it's funny that you said the whole Jack Murphy thing, because in situations like that, I think it's one of those things where it's like, if you make it a big deal, it's going to become a big deal. So I would have just owned up. Yeah, that was me. Next topic.
Right. You know, I wrote that article and I no longer agree with some of the things I wrote, or I was trying to be, you know, like a shock journalist. I was, you know, there's a million of things he could have said, but instead he snapped at poor Sydney, and it was just kind of ridiculous. And everybody's like, whoa, 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 what's going on here?
So I wanted to bring up the fact that, you know, the name of your podcast is The Grift, and that kind of
love that name
from this phenomenon. And the name of our show actually has a similar origin as the name of your show. When we started speaking out more about not just identity politics and that stuff, but the lockdowns, the mandates, those sorts of things, more and more, Brent and I, his sister Caitlin, like, we kept being accused of dangerous rhetoric. People kept saying, that's dangerous rhetoric, that's dangerous, you can't say that, you're spreading this, you're spreading that misinformation, it's dangerous rhetoric. And when we had the idea for the show, I was just like, why don't we just call it that? People keep accusing us of dangerous rhetoric. Let's just like trademark that, and like that'll be our name. So
I think that's brilliant.
It's the same thing with The Grift. I'm just like, oh, well, you're going to keep accusing me of being a grifter. Well, I'm going to name my freaking show that. This is The Grift. Welcome.
Yeah, but even now that I've called my show The Grift, the same people will see, she even says she's a grifter. I'm like, you guys, it reminds me of that Eminem song. I don't know if you guys remember where he says like, I am whatever you say I am. And it's like, I'm you guys gave me the name, I am just repeating it. Now you have a problem with it, make up your mind.
Yeah, that's basically what that song's about too.
Yeah. Yep.
And all that.
There's a lot of people out there that I think are just kind of like sad or angry or lonely, and they don't have a lot of meaning, and so they derive meaning by, you know, thinking that they're exposing the truth of, you know, XYZ people, when actually, like, they don't really have the self-awareness to realize that they're not really exposing the truth. They're just sort of, you know, raging online at this caricature of you or of whoever that they've sort of created in their head. They've heard, you know, a few little things here and there, or maybe they've heard some things in their echo chamber, and they've got this characterized version of, you know, a person or a creator in their head, and they're just, you know, they sling arrows at it because they think that they're doing some sort of good deed, when really they're just like wasting their time and energy.
There's a great Facebook post that a friend of mine put up the other day, and it's basically about this topic, but he wrote this. He said, remember, people talk shit about you because, 1, your life is more interesting than theirs. 2, you reflect some unlived, unloved, unacknowledged, or unfulfilled part of them that they are not yet ready to see or are not yet ready to deal with. And 3, they are frustrated in their lives, and it is easier to complain about your perceived flaws than to address their own. so much compassion for the haters, may they find themselves and find their way.
Yep. I totally agree with that. And I think also it's one thing that I find fascinating are these other huge creators that have like massive followings, and their whole shtick is to just criticize other creators based on their opinions. Like there's one guy, he's made like 15 videos of me, and he has like thousands of followers. And I'm thinking to myself, what are you actually accomplishing by doing this? Because you are giving me more publicity, but you're not actually making the world a better place, you know, because instead of going online and saying, well, Gothix is wrong about this, why don't you do something that's actually meaningful? Like if you truly believe your positions, why don't you go out and do something, you know, legislation wise? Why don't you run for office? Why don't you do something locally, you know?
I think to them it is meaningful what they do to you. They're just they see it as, well, I have to correct her wrong think because her wrong think is hurting people across the world, and by doing it I'm righteously defending those poor oppressed people.
Well, their stupidity hurts me, so what do I get?
Good point. Good point. So I'm going to ask a little bit about your origin story, and the Little Mermaid incident. Maybe you want to go into that a bit. That was sort of what propelled you into the whole sphere of political commentary, correct? Because before
Yes.
you were doing Twitch streaming, and you were making a living off of that, right? You were able to leave your job, and all of a sudden you talk about the Little Mermaid and you tell people you voted for Trump, and your whole life changed. Go into that a bit.
Yeah. So let me first preface, let me paint the picture for you. So as well as me being able to quit my job and do Twitch full time, I had a lot of support from these streaming communities that were made to amplify Black voices. So there's a lot of these, like, you know, I'm not going to say what names they are, but they're communities that were that would highlight other Black creators, sort of like, hey, look at us, we're Black, we're in this space. Yeah. So when I saw the announcement of The Little Mermaid was going to be played by a Black actress, I was actually in the middle of the movie theater. I was about to get my popcorn. I forgot what movie I was going to see that day, and I had tweeted out a response to that. Hey guys, can we, you know, not just accuse people of being racist just because they have an issue with Ariel being Black? Because I have an issue with it. It's weird. It's pandering, you know? And immediately I started getting descended on by a bunch of people, primarily the folks that I just talked about. A lot of other Black creators who had my back, wanted to put me into the spotlight and say, hey, look at this chick, she's doing great things. But instantly I was anti-Black, I was self-hating, I had internalized racism. The narrative just swapped because I wasn't on board with the tokenizing, or like, I don't like this idea of taking existing characters and swapping their race, because that tells me you lack creativity and you think that you can only see success if you take something from a white character and make it Black. That's not, what is that?
I agree. That's kind of how I look at it too. It's like there are already plenty of excellent Black characters out there.
Yeah.
You know, you don't need to take other races of characters or whatever and change them around. And I think it's correct. It kind of feeds back into the narrative that there's something like superior about white characters, or something that you need to change them into the other race to give them that proper representation or whatever. And that's what it comes down to. It's like representation.
Right.
This is the big thing with the SJW crowd, is we need to see more people who look like us in spaces. But this has been happening since the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I grew up in a very, like, I grew up on Hey Arnold.
Oh, I love Hey Arnold.
You know what I mean? It's like, come on,
Yeah.
like that show was like, that was my life. Like I grew up in the city in an urban environment, and like my friends were mixed. You know, you had the Black kid and the Jewish kid and the Asian kid and the obsessive girl and like the fat kid or whatever. Like, it looked like Hey Arnold. And in the 90s, it wasn't this thing that you had to like browbeat people with.
Right.
It just felt natural.
And I think honestly, the idea of representation is a lie anyway, because you would be blind to say, or you'd be lying to say that, because think of all the actors and characters that have been Black for like years ago. And now we're complaining about representation as if we haven't had all of these people in Hollywood exist. Like, that's kind of insulting. Yeah. But yeah, that's primarily what happened. Is I spoke on that, and then my audience started to leave because they thought that I was anti-black, and I was racist or something. I don't know. And I ended up taking like a few months of off from Twitch. I came back to Twitch for a little bit, and then I got canceled again because I voted for the orange man.
Talk about that a bit. So
yeah. So I what was interesting about this, and this kind of goes to show you that a lot of people have, it's like a rotating door of hypocrisy. Like people will say, cancel culture is bad and it shouldn't happen. And a lot of people stayed in my community that had my back through that whole Ariel thing. But then when I voted for Trump, those same people then canceled me online. They threw me under the bus. They started labeling me a bigot. And it's like, whoa, what happened a few months ago? It's like, oh, we were with you with that, but this is too much.
yeah,
So
not too far.
it's too far. And I'm like, okay. So it got to the point where I was like, before any of this happened, I was streaming to like 120 viewers concurrently on Twitch. And then after I had voted for Orange Man, I was down to like 10, maybe 7 viewers, and I was just doing that for a few months, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like I'm not going to change my opinion on this. I'm not going to, do this for the sake of subs. So like I need to pivot.
And that's kind of what brought you to where you are now.
Yep.
So something clicked in your head and you're like, all right, well, I guess I got to strategize and think about how I'm going to approach all of this differently. And I respect it. I think it takes a lot to stay true to who you are, to what you think, is right, and to face the mob and to just not let them cancel you. Because you could have just said, well, whatever, I guess I'll shut up about this stuff. I'll go back to streaming video games and just be a good little token, and I'll get all the views and be accepted into the mainstream culture. But you're like, well, I'm not going to do that. And I think when you get to these certain moments, you have to make a decision. Do I quiet down and just retreat, or do I don't want to say get louder, but get more firm in my stance? And
I had to think back to the whole reason I quit my job in the first place, because I'm a high school dropout and I've always just worked customer service jobs, which are not fun. Getting yelled at by random people on the phone is not fun. But I said to myself, I am just miserable doing this work. I come to work every day, I sit in a cubicle, I hate my job. I want to do something that actually makes me happy. And that's why I quit my job initially. So after I got canceled, I really had this moment where I'm like, do I just go back into corporate America? Because I could avoid all of this stuff if I just work in an office all day. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. Because that was the whole reason that I quit my job, was to not answer to anybody, was to be my own boss. So despite the fact that essentially I still am dealing with customers, angry customers online, I'm still my own boss, and I'm still going to express whatever opinions that I have, because at the end of the day, that was the whole point,
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah, it's very strange how these people like kind of just like get obsessed. They get hung up on like a certain thing, and then they just want to like destroy you as soon as you don't reconcile with whatever their previous image of you was.
Yeah, we've been accused of internalized homophobia. We're self-hating gays, like all that stuff. If you don't fit into the woke mindset, they will cast you out. And and I'm not saying like conservatives all completely embrace us either, but for the most part, more of them have been willing to at least talk and to have a dialogue or conversation. The more radical lefty types, they view us as like traitors. Traitors,
the enemy.
The enemy.
If they had their way, they'd throw us into
probably, because we're probably worse than like the straight white man devil, because we are a minority, right? So in their head, they're just like, you should be on our side and against this oppressive structure. And it's just, I don't know. I don't like putting people in boxes like that. I think people are more than these, surface level things that are beyond our control. Like, I didn't pick being gay. You didn't pick being black. These aren't accomplishments. They're just situations we were born into. They weren't things that we did, I guess I'm proud of like being gay and having been able to get through life okay, but I'm not proud of like being gay itself. That's That's not an accomplishment. I didn't do anything.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And also, because you just reminded me of something. One thing that I learned after creating a new viewer base on YouTube is that I think the pushback was so bad when I had the comments about Ariel and when I had the audacity to vote for Orange Man was because if you don't disclose certain parts about your beliefs to people, and then when it comes out later on, people feel like they've been betrayed, and the pushback was a lot vicious because of that. Because at a certain time, I did have Trump derangement syndrome, and I also told people when I was streaming, don't talk about religion, politics, like the things that people would generally get upset about. So now that I'm openly talking about it, people feel like I betrayed them in some way. So now I make a point to just not censor myself and just be upfront about all of my beliefs, because it's like a sifting process where the people that appreciate that open-mindedness and the ability to stand firm in your positions, they're going to flock to that, as opposed to finding out later on where they think that they've been slighted in some way.
It's also allowing yourself to be wrong, you know, and
Right.
a lot of people are afraid to say what they really think and feel because they know they're going to have to defend their position, you know, and that's exhausting, that alone. But they're also afraid they're wrong, or they might be proven wrong, when people, I think, need to embrace this idea more. And the more outspoken we are, someone can point out to us when we actually are wrong.
Right.
And hopefully, if we're not too egotistical and arrogant, we can acknowledge that and admit it. But, you know, you have to speak.
Right.
Be able to even know if you're wrong. That's
right.
That's very important. But yeah, allowing yourself to be wrong, I think, is important.
Yeah, we just seem to be in this environment, this cultural environment, where sort of like saying certain things is almost equivalent to like a violent act.
Yeah,
which is odd, because we have, you know, a lot of rising crime and a lot of violence going on that's sort of like not really covered, or it's, you know, they have these new bail reform laws where they kind of make it so that, you know, people that are violent offenders, they can either get out quickly or get out easier than they were able to before, pre-COVID. But it's just like this ridiculous like juxtaposition where they've taken, you know, words, like these are just words and ideas that people are just trying to discuss, you know, you're trying to share your opinion, and all of a sudden, you know, just for espousing that in public, they jump on you. It's like, look what they're doing or trying to do to Joe Rogan. I mean, this whole thing with Neil Young is just a really perfect example of how they don't want people with large audiences, or with any audience really, to be able to say, you know, the forbidden things. And it's just like, for me, you know, I have a little bit of a contrarian streak. So when somebody tells me that I'm not allowed to do something, I really want to do it more.
Yep.
So it strikes me that this is kind of like, we're in this weird cultural moment where, you know, these people have no self-awareness, or like, you know, self-awareness is like more rare, and they just end up, you know, being the problem that they're complaining about. And we see this with like the CRT folks, and, you know, these people that seem to think that, like, you know, skin color is everything. You know, I was arguing with a guy on Twitter just, you know, before we started the show, who was, you know, telling me that, you know, what somebody's success, I think it was just talking about Joe Rogan, that his whiteness was a huge factor in his success. And I was like, well, that's true. Then, you know, we have Dave Chappelle, who was not white, and he's this huge success. And we've had, you know, Barack Obama, who was there, and he's a huge success. Like, we've had examples of plenty of
actually,
people across the spectrum.
I wanted to go back into the critical race theory topic and ask Gothix a bit about that. So you've been very outspoken about critical race theory, and you've gotten a lot of shit for it and a lot of backlash for it.
Yeah.
What, you know, if you could sum up, like, if someone asked you, what is critical race theory and why are you so outspoken against it, what would you say to them?
It's brainwashing kids to be racist, and also brainwashing them to to hate themselves. Primarily, if you're Black, you hate yourself, and then you're also being racist towards white people. Which, contrary to the woke belief, yes, Black people can still be racist. And I would say that. What was the other part of the question? I'm sorry.
Well, like, how would you define that, right? Critical race theory, and like, why are you so outspoken against it?
Yeah, well, I am so outspoken because I don't think we should be teaching any of that stuff. I think the whole purpose of going to school is to learn math, science, real science that you can question.
How to write an essay.
Yeah, exactly. How to write your name, how to read. But critical race theory, that is just imposing a warped ideology onto people that don't agree with it. If and this is something like in the Black community, this critical race theory is kind of an extension of things that I've already experienced growing up. In the Black community, there's kind of like this split where you'll have the self-fulfilling side of being Black, where it's like we don't think that our skin color holds us back. We don't think the white man is going to take our jobs. We don't think that anything in 2020 is actually going to prevent us from achieving something because of our skin color. But then you got the other sector that they think the opposite, that all of their circumstances in life are because of their skin color. So this is just sort of a repackaging and then feeding it to the masses. And I've already seen what this does just in looking at it from when I'm growing up. There's a big difference between like my life and someone who thinks in this way. They're usually very angry too. And I don't think that that's something that they should be sharing with people. Like if you believe that about yourself and your skin color, keep it to yourself. Why do you have to sell this to other people? I mean, I know the answer, but like, yeah, so I would say that that's the reason why it's not something that's helpful. And I think it's going to do the opposite as far as amplifying Black people. I think it's going to do the opposite.
So what would you say to critics, I'm play devil's advocate a bit,
Mm-hmm.
say, oh, well, critical race theory is just teaching the full, complete American history and the stuff that is left out typically and hidden from us about
Okay.
Evil racist past.
Perfect. Well, first of all, history is not always pretty. And I think we should leave the history as it is. There's no need to rewrite it. And as far as showing people the full history, like I said earlier, I'm a high school dropout. So I came out fine not being informed on every aspect of Black history. Like I am a functioning human being, and knowing all of this extra information, what would it have done for me? And this is, I think, the insidious part about wanting to inform people about all of these things. You're essentially saying like, we want you to know this. Well, why? Why can't you allow someone the ability to inform themselves? Why do you want to inform us? It seems like in these situations, this will give someone the perfect opportunity to feed us information that might not actually be true or might not be helpful. So that's why I'm like, nah.
Yeah, I feel the same way with critical queer theory.
Yeah,
something that I've had to, like one of the focus I had on my solo channel was to speak out in the different manifestations of that, because it's the same thing. They're targeting the children. They're bombarding them with this like really high grade psychological propaganda that, they're not allowed to debate or argue with. And it warps, very young children, prepubescent children, it warps their perception of sex and gender in such a way that it's not likely to make their lives, improved or better by it.
Confusing then.
Well, and there's been experiments. There was this guy, I'm trying to remember his name, in Australia, who did this thing with a pair of twins, and I think they were both boys. And the idea was that he flipped the gender presentation of one of the young twins and, charted, like his thesis was that, gender is just like a social construct and you can, totally, bend and play with it and it's no big deal. Well, the one kid who he gender bended ended up, I think committing suicide because the trauma of going through that experience of being told you're a girl when you're a boy was just so much for that individual that they couldn't handle it. And this is what I'm seeing now with the mass sort of like medicalization of trans ideology. We have surgeons that are willing to take healthy tissue off of young children because, for a couple of months, they've been experimenting with these ideologies. And it seems like it's just sort of the same thing where it's like trying to subvert the traditional, ideas when it comes to sex and gender, and in order to like push this religion almost. And that's kind of what strikes me about CRT and CQT, is that they have a lot of religious forms to them. We have like the proselytization, the whole idea that they have to go out and sort of speak and preach and convert people into the ideology.
Like missionaries.
It's very, it's like, I'm just imagine a day when you have like, like wokeists knocking at your door and be like, can we talk to you about critical queer theory? Like,
if anything, I think the trans stuff is even more taboo and touchy than the CRT stuff. I think the trans issue and the non-binary issue is probably the most taboo thing right now of all the subjects. Gothix, you've gotten backlash quite a bit.
Oh yeah,
talking about subjects as well. On that note too, you should check out our episode with Laura Becker. She was a former trans man who detransitioned, and we had an excellent conversation with her about a lot of this stuff. But yeah, talk a bit about that, speaking out about the trans stuff, LGBT, all of that. You've gotten a lot of hate on Twitter. I've seen some of it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's funny that you say this thing about queer theory, because I've brought this up before, and the same people that are advocating for critical race theory will say queer theory doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. What are you talking about? So yeah, I've gotten a lot of backlash. Like, listen, I think I have the position in life where I think everyone should be allowed to live their life however you want to live it. Who am I to say that you feel a certain way about your body or your identity, whatever? The problem becomes when you have to impose that on other people, when you have to promote it. Because here's the thing about the whole trans ideology. It's that it is being promoted as an ideology. But the trans people that I've spoken to, Blair White, Buck Angel, people like that, they acknowledge that they have a mental disorder. They suffer from gender dysphoria. And that involves therapy, and in some cases, in their situations, transitioning to the opposite sex helped them and helped them with their depression and stuff like that. Now, the problem with how society is normalizing this discussion of gender ideology is they are essentially promoting a mental disorder to people. And that's what I need people to recognize. It's like, this isn't a trend that you can just, like a costume you can just put on and say, I am the opposite sex today, or maybe I'm neither, or maybe I'm both, or maybe, there is none of that, because now you're playing with another layer of something that I think shouldn't be played with, which is your mental health, your mental wellness.
Not just that, they're promoting treatments that don't work on helping everyone. Like you said, some people transition and that helps them feel more comfortable to deal with the disorder that they're dealing with, but that does not work for everyone.
Not a one-size-fits-all solution.
And it's taboo, and that's why I brought up Laura Becker, because there are many cases like hers, and that is taboo to these woke SJW people. They don't want to talk about detransitioners. The fact that there are people who get these intervention surgeries and do later on regret it. They find it didn't help them, or it actually made their situation worse, that they wished someone had challenged them or got them to question this instead of, say, pushing them in that direction, instead of, maybe having them consider it a little more before rushing into something so permanent,
Right. And that's the problem now is that because of how militant this trend has become, we have situations where I've actually interviewed a detransitioner on my channel, and they said that it was so easy for them to get the stamp of approval from their therapist. After one session, they were able to get a slip that says, just okay, one? Just one.
Wow.
Jeez.
And they got the okay to get their boob implants. They got the okay to get their hormones. But then months later, when they decided they wanted to detransition, that's when they hit all the roadblocks, because at that point they were viewing it as conversion therapy. Therefore, they didn't want to help facilitate that. And I really feel for these people, because like me personally, I would rather, if someone says, listen, I feel like I'm in the wrong body and I should be the opposite sex, I would want to challenge that. I would want to push back on that. But now a lot of these psychologists, they're
affirm.
Yeah, affirm. And I understand, because of how militant this rhetoric has become. People think, oh, you're gatekeeping or you're invalidating someone.
Sure. And the suicide thing is real. And trans people and stuff have gotten hate. They do get beat up. There are It's like that. So I get it too, you know.
I definitely get it too, but I think these doctors, they're afraid of losing their license is a big part of it.
Yep.
So then they
100%.
say, well, the easy way out is just to put a stamp of approval, but we're going to see a huge backlash for a few years from now. There's going to be a lot more detransitioners, and who's going to be there to pick up the pieces for these people that have been essentially led into the wrong direction instead of properly diagnosing them and pushing back? Because that's what's going to happen. People are going to transition and say, okay, I don't feel like this did anything for me. I still feel the same way. You know, nothing's changed.
Thankfully,
So,
I think, you know, people like Laura will be there, and other people who went down that road and dealt with it, you know, and are now talking about it. And I think it's important. I want to hear more detransition voices. You know, one of the things I told her when she came on the show is that, like, you kind of like don't fit in anywhere in a sense, right? Like a lot of the right conservative types might still look at you strange because you did go through surgery and all of that. And then of course the lefty radical types view you as like a traitor because you didn't stick with it. So it's like people like her kind of are in this weird limbo. It's even more taboo, I think, to have transitioned and then detransitioned now in this current climate than it is to just have transitioned and stayed that way.
yeah, no, I totally agree with you. It's definitely more taboo.
Yeah, I wrote an article a couple of years ago that was primarily going into how the idea around medically transitioning children has changed since, like, you know, the 90s. And in like the last 30 years, the whole idea was called watchful waiting, which was the common approach that most psychologists and gender specialists were advised from their superiors. And that the idea is that if a child presents with dysphoria-like symptoms, that, you know, if they're young, like maybe just stand back, let's just watch and wait, because, you know, 9 times out of 10, the dysphoria tends to resolve on its own as the child ages and they sort of grow out of it. Or, you know, they end up being a homosexual, you know, either, you know, a tomboy type girl becomes a lesbian, or a feminine boy becomes, you know, a gay guy. And it's kind of weird that they throw that accusation of conversion therapy out when that's kind of what they're doing. It's like, if you medically transition a homosexual so that, you know, they have the outward appearance of the opposite sex, and all of a sudden you're like creating straight people, which is basically what they have to do in Iran. In Iran, you know, homosexuality is punishable by death. And it's like that in a lot of the Middle East, especially where Sharia and the Muslim majority sort of controls the political system. But the way that they get around it is that these homosexual men will transition to become women, and that sort of is acceptable for them. So you have a lot of that, you know, and that's literal conversion therapy. It's literally you're turning gay men into, you know, heterosexual women. And it just blows my mind that they have no self-awareness. They're such hypocrites that they throw that accusation out without even considering the full scale of the picture, you know, across the board.
Yeah, they say, oh, everything's a social construct. So isn't that saying that our sexuality, in a sense, is also a social construct? It's when you look at the current woke view of these things, they're almost arguing that we chose to be this way, in a sense. And that because it's just all fluid, you know, like I can be non-binary. I'm not one thing. Like we can just choose and decide the next day, whatever we feel like we are, is that's what we are now. And like you said, you know, you're not hurting anyone. I'm fine with that. You want to go live your life and identify as a cactus, go identify as a cactus. Like that's fucking fine. It's when you start trying to impose these things on people to try to control how they view you, and that
brainwashing kids is really what the problem is.
You need them to be a part of your fantasy, and they inside must also see you as a cactus. And if they don't, they are a bigot. And even if you use their correct cactus pronoun, they'll know if inside you don't truly mean it.
Excuse me, it's cacti. It's cacti. Thank you.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I don't know, man. It's a weird time to be alive.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I also think there's a lot of mental illness out there that's going undiagnosed.
Absolutely.
And just sort of like, you know, paved over. So when I was young, we had, you know, like candy ravers, we had goth kids, we had, you know, skater boys, we had all these little different cliques. And now today, I feel like instead of having those groups, it's like this generation now is like playing with these gender and woke ideologies as if they're sort of the same thing.
Yeah, they're like scenes. It's like a scene.
Yeah, but see, the thing is, though, it's like when I was a goth kid for a few months, and then I became a candy raver, and then I sort of settled on like being relatively preppy.
You were a goth kid for a few months?
I was a goth kid. I was bullied a lot when I was young. So I got a lot of like bus style bullying. Like basically it was, every day, Monday through Friday, morning and afternoons, there was like a pack of kids that would drive me crazy. Because I would go to Catholic school, and I'd take the school with the public school kids. And so the bus would come and pick us up, and I was like the only kid on that bus, and I was wearing a uniform. And so it was easy to target me. So when I went to public school, I transitioned into being goth. Because I wanted to scare these kids into leaving me alone. So I got black contacts. I dyed my hair black.
I was similar in middle school for sure, more than high school, but same. I would try to like give off an aura of like, don't fuck with that kid. Like, leave them alone.
Yeah.
I'd rather have them like think I'm gonna be like the school shooter, even though I'm like sweet as hell. But like just think I might be, so they fucking leave me alone. So it worked.
I was, I actually spread a little bit of a rumor that I was gonna like bring in my
God,
father. Well, before this was, in the the long ago, before school shootings were even a thing. Like it was pre-Columbine. So it wasn't like, I'm surprised if it was post-Columbine, I probably would have been in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, psychiatric help.
But it got these kids to leave me alone, basically. And then after that, after like a month or two of being goth, I switched to being like a candy raver. And so I went the other, end of the spectrum, and I was wearing bright colors, and I dyed my hair and got new contacts. But it's just, I think kids do this, and it's natural, especially if, they're being bullied, or if they're upset, or, just if they're just kids, they're experimenting.
Kids are figuring out their identity. That's kind of the point of being a kid, is you're figuring out your identity.
And we as the adults in the room have the responsibility to be like, you're going through phases. This is part of growing up. You shouldn't have permanent surgery or medical procedures that may permanently affect your ability to have children, because you might want those one day.
Like maybe don't rush into cutting your boobs off. Just saying. Maybe don't rush into that. Just saying. I don't know.
I think that's a great idea. It's funny about your origin story about being goth, because I became goth in high school because I was like, that just looks really cool. Like around high school was the time I learned about like heavy metal, and I was like, okay, I'm loving this. I like this. But then I figured out afterwards, wait a minute, this is actually a deterrent. People look at me and they stay back. I'm like, this is actually kind of cool. But yeah, it's like it's just phases, and I think that there's a lot of people, a lot of adults, especially teachers now, that are kind of endorsing, chopping off one's boobs, and I'm like, that's not normal. That's not. Yeah, kids are gonna make mistakes, but you shouldn't lead them in the direction of purposely making a mistake.
And those are extreme measures. Those should be like last resort things that you turn to deal with dysphoria and those sorts of things. They should not be the immediate go-to solution.
In previous decades too, you would have to be dysphoric for years. You would have to do things like live as cross-dressing for like 6 months or a year,
and now
before you could even get authorization for those surgeries.
Now, like Gothix said, you could just go in there for one visit,
session, and
get approved for hormones and surgery and all this stuff. I agree. There's going to be a lot of pieces to pick up down the line from this, and people like us, people like Laura Becker, and other people who saw this coming. Those kids are going to need us.
Well, there was this video, I don't know if you saw that there was this video that went viral like yesterday or the day before, where this teacher was in a classroom, and she was basically sort of espousing this like pro gender bending ideology, and she was like, kids make great decisions. She was basically saying that if they get their if you go and you get the transition and you have your top taken off, and you decide you don't like that, that's fine. You can go out and get them put back on later. And I'm like, honey, like
that is not. What are you like? We're like Mr. Potato Head. You just take them off, put it back on later.
And that's why the video went viral, because this woman was like literally a teacher in a classroom, telling children or teenagers that this is how it is. It's totally fine. And it just blows my mind. I'm a big fan of like libs of TikTok.
Oh yes,
we all are.
They've just had so many crazy pictures of teachers and things involving teachers, that it really kind of like puts the situation with education and how these people are targeting children like really in the spotlight. And I think it's one of the reasons that acceptance of homosexuality has gone down in recent years when you look at particular polls, is because you have, you know, these people pushing these ideologies onto kids. And, you know, kids are by nature rebellious. They, you know, they're a little contrarian, and they try to push back to find out, you know, where the line is. And so I think a lot of the dropping in acceptance of homosexuality is that we've got a lot of this, you know, like pushing these ideologies onto kids. We have a lot of this drag and trans kids stuff, and I don't think the young people are having it. They're, you know, they're not as, you know, easily as swayed as some adults would like to think. And it's happy. I'm glad to see it. You know, I'm glad to see some of that pushback, but it sucks because it makes, you know, homosexuality a little bit more taboo. And, you know, we fought for a very long, not we, but like, you know, the homosexual community has fought for a long time to sort of separate this idea of predator from, you know, homosexual adult male. And now we've got the predators trying to like slip back into the umbrella, you know, with like saying that they're, you know, that pedophilia is an orientation, or that, you know, like.
I think it goes to show too that like when you're trying to get the conservative types to understand these issues more, the more you push them in this forceful way, you're not going to get them to come around to your side. You're gonna make them flee further and further into their conservatism, because they view this more and more as a threat. And that's what I feel like is happening now, and why we're seeing this massive polarization. One of the reasons we're seeing it.
Yeah, I feel really bad because like all of this gender ideology stuff, everyone in the LGBT is kind of grouped in with it, which is why I always pose the question to trans people, like, do you think the T should be removed from the LGB? Because I'm finding that a lot of this rhetoric is kind of like going in through that direction. So it's like when the pushback comes from like a lot of the people on the conservative end, they're going to just make the generalization that it's you guys that are pushing this. And I feel really bad because, and this is why I try to have conversations with people that are gay and that are trans that disagree with what the woke is saying, to paint the picture that this isn't something that that speaks for all people within this community. So it's not something that should be promoted as such.
100% agree. And we've talked about the two on the show before, you know, like a gay man's experience is vastly different than a lesbian's experience, which is vastly different than a bisexual's experience, which is vastly different than a trans person's experience. We aren't all the same. Our experiences are quite different. So I think and
that's part of the beauty of diversity.
It is, but there is also, I think, something problematic about like you said, grouping all of this together into one broad sweeping generalization, as if we're all on board with this, as if all of our experiences are the same.
Well, and also let's take the idea of lumping, let's call it alternative sexualities together. You know, eventually like you end up with just everybody under the umbrella, like, and that's kind of what we see as they continuously add letters and groups and different people. Like the whole idea was that with the rainbow was that it was supposed to include everyone already, and then they went and started modifying it, you know, to incorporate, you know, black and brown people or trans people or whatever. And it's just like the rainbow
it's the rainbow.
It's already the entire spectrum.
It's the color spectrum. And even if your color isn't in there, you can take any color in the rainbow and mix it together and get your color. There you go.
Yeah. It's and the new LGBT flag is an eyesore. Like it's like it looks like military rankings when I see it.
It does. It's really strange looking. And they keep tacking more things onto it.
It seems like the craziness comes up, you know, every June when Pride Month rolls around, and there's always a series of, you know, op-eds and whatever. I remember last year the Washington Post had this self-identified lesbian who's married to a trans woman. She wrote this op-ed called, like, it was titled something like, "Yes, there's kink at Pride and I want my kids to see it." And I was just like, oh, lady. and it was funny because I made this video and then I went to her Twitter profile and I was, you know, checking out some of her other stuff, and she has like, you know, hashtag actually autistic in her bio. And I was like, well, that explains maybe why she wants her kids to see kink at Pride. And I was, I felt very strongly that I needed to make a video speaking out against that, because first of all, as a gay man, I don't think kink belongs at Pride. And I also don't think children belong at Pride, because it's not for them. It's for, 18 plus, gay and whatever adults. It's not, and if you're a teenager and you identify that way and, you end up there, like whatever. But when I see, op-eds where these parents that have very young children and they're trying to include them in these events, I'm just like, guys, this is why people come at us with allegations of us being predators.
Yeah,
like,
because they go online and they see pictures of the 4-year-old walking next to like 2 guys on all fours with dog gimp masks on.
Yep. I always said, like, I only went to Pride twice in my life. The first time I was years ago, and I could get behind it. I was like, okay, here's a booth about equality. All right, here's a booth about information, safe sex. Okay. The next year I went, freaking dildo cannons and like people twerking in the streets, and I'm like, what is going on? and I'm trying to like
dildo cannons. I'm not.
I'm just gonna tweet out like quote dildo cannons
dildo cannons.
Yeah.
One year I went to Folsom. You know what the Folsom Street Fair is? Have you ever heard of this? So in San Francisco, they have an event. Usually it's in like, January, February. It's sort of like offset with Pride, but it's called the Folsom Street Fair. And it's sort of like a Pride event, but it's a little bit more expansive. It's not just gay people, but it's also like kinky people, and you'll see a lot of exhibition there. You'll see a lot of like women in costumes. There's a lot of like BDSM role-playing type things, women getting dressed up as horses, having their like horse master in like a little thing, pulling them around, like that, furries, that kind of stuff. And one year I went and I was hanging out, with a bunch of gay guys, and we're walking through the crowd, and there's like naked people, and there's people in these costumes, and there's people, posing as furniture. And I see this like totally straight-laced looking family. It's like mom, dad, and 2 kids. And the kids were, not old, but like not young either. It was like probably, 12 and like 8. And I was just like, what are you doing here? It's like, this is not for you people. They're like all huddled together. And I was just like
wandered onto the wrong street.
I was just so embarrassed. I was like, this is not how I want straight people to see, gay people. Yeah. And it just seems like there's always this, it's like the double-edged sword. Like our community is so diverse that, you have this kind of stuff alongside of, more normal, like homosexual conservative type people who want nothing to do with that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Folsom Street Fair is a sight, and I only went once, and it was definitely enough. And
you don't need to go.
Yeah, I don't want to go. It sounds very terrifying. But like in the same way that you said that, you don't want that, these straight families to see gay people like that. It's kind of like how a lot of people perceive Black people as like being oppressed victims. And it's like, this is why I'm happy. Like, I didn't even know you guys were gay, honestly. So like you guys are speaking out, and I hope that more people within this community can actually speak out as well, because otherwise, if you're going to leave the media and leave the loudest voices to their own devices, they're going to portray you in a certain way, in the same way they do to Black people. And then what?
We talked about this with Mike Harlow actually on the show. GLAAD, the GLAAD organization, and how they have their hand basically in every media portrayal of how gay men are portrayed. And they typically portray us in this like stereotypical, effeminate, eunuch kind of way almost.
So one of the things that really upset me about the sort of early acceptance of homosexuality in the mainstream was that we had this show called Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. And I got so upset by the fact that show was creating this false perception of homosexual men as, these metrosexuals who were just so up with fashion, who were a little bit, like little femme, a little, like, whatever. And they sort of created this like idea that if you were, a straight family and you didn't have gay people in your life, and, but you were watching TV, you're like, oh, that's what gay is. And then it's the same thing with RuPaul. Like they see these like, drag queens and these amazing outfits and, outlandish makeup and, dancing and all this stuff. And they see that and they're like, oh, that's what gay is. But also like gay can just be like, two dudes holding hands, like, you know, that are trying to raise a family, and you don't see that. Like, that's not celebrated, and it's not focused on, and it's just kind of like, stop like representing my people wrong.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I said. Like, I had no idea you guys were gay, and it's because I how your demeanor is very rare when I see it in like the gay community. It's usually I see that over feminization and that like yes, like that lisp. But I don't even know where people get that from, like where they pick it up.
Which is fine, honestly.
I can do it.
We have nothing wrong with more.
Sometimes I'll clean it out a bit.
We have friends who are more feminine and feminine gay men and stuff, and we're fine with that. It's just the stereotype that all gay men have to be more effeminate, and it's just not true. There are plenty of gay men out there who, like you said, you wouldn't be able to even tell unless you asked them or they told you, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
a lot of it is like signaling too. You know, many gay men had to find ways to kind of subtly let other gay men know that they're gay, so they could, you know, meet and things like that. So I think a lot of that is why the effeminate thing becomes sort of exaggerated sometimes.
Yeah. We got apps now, though. People can just go on apps, you know?
Let's go on Grindr.
Did you hear about that new one that's like just for like females? And they got a lot of flack because they were having women submit like selfies, and in order to, they had an AI algorithm to be like, okay, that's a female face, and they were not letting people on. They were excluding trans women, and so it became this big to do on social media. And the CEO eventually came out. She's like, you can call me any name that you want, like, this is our app, this is our customer base, and if you don't like it, it's not for you. Like, people were just like, ah!
I think that is admirable. Like, I think that people forget that not everything is for you, and you don't always need to be included in stuff. Like, I see it with me, like I just became a Christian, and one thing that I see is like I'm seeing a lot of like the trans ideology get infiltrated into the church, and I'm like, well, guys, it's just not for you. It's not for you. Why do you have to try and change something? It's just not for you.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, it's very bizarre how people sort of, and I don't know if it's necessarily like all people, or if it's more of like the cluster B, the personality disordered, you know, talking about like narcissistic, histrionic, psychopathic, sociopathic type people. But they seem to have this a priori, they have the right to be in a space, you know, because of XYZ reasons. It's like, no, like
entitlement.
People have a right. Yeah, they're entitled. It's like people have a right to freely associate and freely dissociate with whomever they want. And, you know, you don't have like the right to barge into a space and to be like, I belong here. Like we saw with like the that trans,
the Wii Spa thing.
The Wii Spa thing, which that was funny because for a long time, people were like, that's a predator, that's predator. And then it turned out that person actually had been charged with, you know, predatory behavior before.
This touches too on the subject of like, oh, if you don't want to sleep with a trans person, you're transphobic. And same thing with like the body positivity movement, which we were talking to Starsan on about this, like, oh, if you don't want to sleep with, you know, a fat person or a heavy person, you're fat phobic.
Yeah,
you know, it's very similar.
Yeah, there's this level of entitlement to, you know, like it's very Brave New World. Like in Brave New World, one of the things that sort of signaled that the world was a dystopia was that people didn't have the right to refuse sexual advances from other people. There was this idea that everyone belonged to everyone else, and so if somebody was sexually attracted to you, you were obligated to, you know, indulge their attraction. And it just it struck me because like that was one of the core concepts in this book that's like a, you know, key dystopian novel, and here we're seeing it today manifest in these ideologies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's yeah, I had a thought, then I had a brain fart. It could be the lack of caffeine.
It's all good.
It's all good.
We can talk about something a little less serious.
Well, I wanted to ask a bit about Starsan and how you guys know each other. We are fans. We definitely crush on Starsan.
We love Cassandra.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, she's great. I've known her since I was in high school. I actually, for like a week in high school, I dated her now husband. So like, yeah. Like it wasn't serious or anything. It's like we held hands. Like that was the extent of it. And you know, at some point, it was when Obama got in office. that my brain started getting a little bit warped slightly. And then when it came down to her voting for Trump, I actually stopped being her friend for a little bit.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, because I laugh about this a lot because if I go back in my Facebook messages, I can find the emails that I sent to her, and I don't even know who that person was. Like, I was radicalized. Like, I'm like, you're voting for a racist. Like, I'm black. Don't you care about me? Like, it just made no sense.
Honestly,
that's fascinating.
That's well, see, that to me, that's like a really great sign of hope, because if you can come from where you were to where you are, that means a lot of other people can too. And that's very encouraging for me, because I feel like we need a lot more people to make that little journey.
Yeah, to make that jump,
Yeah,
that's crazy though. And I've definitely gone back and like, just sometimes Facebook will like remind you of something you posted like 10 years ago or whatever. And I've had moments like that too, where I'll read it and I'll be like, I don't even recognize that person. It's like, I would never post something like that now.
Yeah, I have an old live journal.
Oh, me too. It's somewhere there. Oh yeah, but
that's crazy. I didn't know that you actually had canceled Starsun's friendship.
Yeah, I canceled her, and when I started going through this journey of me making the content I do now, I started getting a lot of pushback from people on the left, and I was depressed about it. I'm like, dude, like I don't know what to do about this. So I would consult with her, and hey, she's been a Republican and a Catholic for her entire life, so she knows a thing or two about being discriminated just based on her beliefs. So I've leaned on her a lot for like just kind of helping me see like it's okay to have these opinions, and you're gonna get through this. So she's really been there for this entire process with me, and I'm really excited now because now I kind of pushed her into the realm of content creation, and I think
we did too. I remember she tweeted something like, "Should I start a YouTube channel?"
Yes,
like,
yes. And I think her voice is needed, and I'm really excited for her.
Agreed. I'm very happy she's talking about the things she was talking about. And when we had her on, that was a really unique episode. We had not talked about the body positivity issues yet, so her voice is greatly welcomed, I think, in the fight against the woke cult.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel like there needs to it's almost like there has to be this sort of balancing effect from the based, whatever the group is, whether it's whether you're black or whether you're gay or whether you're large, you have to have those based voices from that group sort of come out and sort of self-policing almost the extremes of people that sort of claim identity or membership in this group, which is kind of just really ridiculous. It's not like there's like a gay club or a black club or a fat club. Like there is no group really. It's not like we're all on the same message board, or we're all getting the same emails. It's like, but it does seem to have this balancing effect when people come out from a particular group and they espouse more conservative or more contrarian takes. And I feel like it helps everyone else sort of not be totally blinded by one perspective, thinking that all the gays all think this, or all black people think that, or all fat people act like this.
It shows there's a diversity of viewpoints amongst the so-called minorities or oppressed groups.
And I think that's what true diversity is. It's not so much
it's not just diversity of who you're sleeping with or what you look like. It's also diversity of thought, and that's what like the radical SJW woke types can't seem to grasp, that they preach this diversity, right? But they are actually very intolerant of any thinking that diverges from their own thinking. And I'm not saying that there aren't conservative types who are like that as well. We mentioned it earlier before we talked, when before we started the show, you made a recent video, right, about the abortion issue, and you got a bit of backlash from some of your more right or conservative followers who are like, I'm unfollowing you now. Maybe talk a bit about that.
Yeah, it was, I look at this as an opportunity for me. Like, I always look at bad situations now as like a learning moment. Like, there's a reason this is happening. And for the past few months with me making content, I've become very frustrated in trying to convey my arguments to people that think I'm only making my arguments because I'm just getting money from the conservatives or the Republicans. And I'm trying to make the argument that my beliefs aren't specific to a political side. And I'm like, how do I get these people to understand this? And
there's also easier ways to make money, people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, I made a video about my stance on abortions, and a lot of people who have been, condemning the radical left for months about how they live in echo chambers and they only want to stay in their safe spaces. These same people were in my comment section yesterday talking about, I'm unfollowing you now because I can't stand for this opinion. So explain to me what the difference is between you and the woke that you've been complaining about. It's like a rotating door. It's the same exact thing. And I think that this opportunity of people saying that they want to unfollow, it's a great opportunity to not only show the left, hey, I don't have allegiance to one specific side. I don't do that. And also for the viewers that are thinking about leaving, it's like, I want you to recognize that you're not going to find a single person on the planet that you're going to agree with 100%. And if you keep, canceling, unfollowing, defriending people just based on different opinions, you're going to end up alone.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, well, and people should have more like the true idea of forming, so this is like one of the things that I've noticed is that there tends to be two different types of people. You have these authoritarian type people that require an external structure in order to attach themselves to. They need to be in a tribe, they need to be in a group, they need to have a consistent ideology that they're sort of told, versus more independent type people who can take bits and pieces from here, from there. It doesn't have to be all coherent, or it doesn't have to be all from the same source. And Bob Altemeyer talks about this a lot in his book, The Authoritarians. But he makes this argument that like we're sort of split 50-50 between these two types of people. And
you find them on both sides.
You find them on all across the political spectrum.
There's the authoritarian MAGA people as much as there's the, authoritarian BLM types. It's, you're going to find them on both sides.
The thing is, you can't just like all of a sudden decide that, oh, I like this creator. I like this creator. I like this. I hate this creator. They have a take. I don't agree. Like, no, come on. Like, just, like accept that. Oh, wow. Like, here's a different perspective. You may not like the idea. You don't even have to agree with it.
Disagree with one point and still respect someone in their work and what they do.
There's an entire genre of videos that are based on people having channels where they take a take that they didn't like from another creator and then they start talking about it. Like, it's like a whole thing.
Well, we mentioned Tim Pool on the show quite a few times because we like him. We're fans of him. We respect his work. We don't agree with everything Tim says. There's quite a bit of things Tim says that we get frustrated with, or we're like, what the hell, Tim? Take a position on this or that. Or
yeah.
And it's not like when he does or says those things, we're just like, all right, we're going to unsubscribe,
done with him.
Or like he didn't really address the whole Jack Murphy thing as much as a lot of people wanted him to. I'm not going to just be like, all right, well, screw Tim, I'm unsubscribing because I'm just going to assume how he feels about this or that because he didn't address this or do this the way I want it, whatever. Not everyone's going to please you, and like Gothix said, there's no one on the planet you're going to find who agrees with you 100% on anything.
No. And also, just to add to that, I think just the act of announcing that you're unsubscribing, to me, it's like you're seeking the validation of other people. Because when I'm going to do something, I just do it. I don't seek approval. I don't announce it on top of the mountaintops. I just do it. So what are you actually accomplishing? Are you trying to get other people to go with you? Then I don't get it.
I think that is it, actually.
Either that, or it's like a bit. It's it's a slight almost. Like they're trying to slight you. They're trying to make you feel bad. Yeah. It's kind of funny because it's very common. And our buddy Josh from the Disaffected podcast.
I was just thinking about him.
He had this woman. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she is sort of like a quote unquote libertarian, but not really. And she had followed him. Basically, he kind of knew that she'd followed him so that she could eventually, publicly sort of denounce him and unfollow him. And
yeah, so he posted a tweet like criticizing people who put like, I think PhD or like MD
in their Twitter
profile names, and he was criticizing that, and she was one of those people. Like, she had it in her name, so she came back and just commented, and she was just like, I'm unfollowing you for this, by the way. And He was just like, I knew you were going to do that as soon as you followed me, that
Right.
you followed me just so you can do this later and make a display out of it. And
Right.
I wonder how often that really happens on Twitter too, where people like pre-plan it, like, oh, I'm going to like follow them, but then later I'm going to wait for the right moment to make a scene out of this.
Well, this actually happened when I got canceled for voting for Trump. A lot of people, like I had a massive Discord community at one point, and I nuked the community when people started leaving. And how they left was because of my opinions. They would go on Twitter and they would write, you know what twitlongers are? They can like you can write like a long blog and like link it to your Twitter. So these people were writing blogs announcing that they're no longer associated with me to all of their followers. And I'm like 50 people must have written a blog of their own, like they're expressing their own opinions. I'm like, what are you doing this for?
It's so communist, man. It really is. It reminds me of shit I read about in like the freaking Lenin Stalin era where friends were doing that. They were like openly declaring, you know, cutting off certain people, or, you know, because they were afraid that the party would come down on them. And they're like, I need to announce that I support the ideology. Hey, I don't associate with this person anymore. That's not me. Because they want to be spared from the mob, I think. And as soon as they see the mob coming down on, say, you, and they're like, oh shit, I'm associated with this person. They're like, I don't want to be dragged into that. So they're like, I need to set the record straight so everyone knows that I'm woke. You know, don't come for me.
Yeah, and people actually disclosed that to me when they were leaving. They said, you are a marketing nightmare, Gothix. We can't associate with you. And I checked their channels months down the line. They're streaming to 2 viewers, so I don't exactly know if I had anything to do with this.
Hey, maybe you should have considered my marketing strategy, because clearly yours aren't working.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah, I don't know, man.
I was looking at this, or I was just looking for like my article on transgender things, and I was searching for it, but it popped up with this this transgender swimmer at UPenn, Leah Thomas. Have you heard of this person?
Oh, is this the one who?
Oh, this is he, she, them. I'm not sure which pronouns that they go by, so don't kill me.
All
YouTube.
of them.
All of the pronouns. Basically, he's a biological male. And she identifies as a woman, but when you look at her, she's like clearly like a 6 foot, 3 or 2 like dude. And it's very controversial right now because she's killing it in the ladies division, but when people are hypothesizing that the reason she transitioned is because she couldn't sort of like hack it in the men's league. And now she's getting all of this attention on all these, like, she's getting name recognition.
You have to wonder.
Well, it's just one of those things. And it's like, it's kind of funny when you look at a picture of her, him, they, whatever, because she, clearly looks like a dude. I don't have one right here.
Oh, yeah. I saw this.
But yeah.
I feel bad, honestly, for these female athletes who train their asses off, put all this work and time in to like get into their league, and then some guy is just like, I'm a girl now, and steps in and wins.
Yeah. It's really crazy when you hear from the social justice sector that the cis white males are dominating everything, or when you hear about like men dominate the country, but then you can say I'm trans and then like they have amnesia. It's like, hold on a second. Like, what is happening right now? You're destroying women's sports, but 5 seconds ago you were complaining about the men who, whatever. Very confusing.
Yeah, it's very strange the way that they can sort of compartmentalize these things, or the one thing I've noticed about the radical left is their primary means of argumentation is either an ad hominem, so they slur their ideological opponents as a racist, xenophobe, misogynist, transmisogynist, whatever. They label you as that, and so thus anything you say is just the rhetoric of a person that doesn't deserve to speak. Or they start redefining words. And we saw this with the trans women are women sort of argument. What I found fascinating about this idea that trans women are women is that it simultaneously makes the argument while implying that you cannot disagree with it. It's a statement, and it sort of contradicts itself, because we know that a trans woman and an adult human female, a biological woman, are not the same thing. And
They're not, Brent.
Well,
No, you can't say
They
they
get-
are, Brent. They are the same. Brent.
Okay.
They are 100% the same. And if you don't agree with that, I'm gonna call your job and have you removed.
Well, that's good because I don't have one.
Got him.
Yeah. So, but it strikes me that they either will insult you or they'll redefine the terms in order to make it so that they're correct. And it's just like those are just like little semantic games. Like that's not a legitimate argument. It doesn't hold any logic or reason.
It is a game they want you to kind of play, and what they don't realize is that like people like us were already on board, but when they start to push it to that level is when you start to lose us. Like, you're a trans man, great. You're a trans man. You're not a man. You're not a man.
Right.
You start trying to push it to that point where you're like, no, I am the same as you. That's when you start to lose me, because you're not. I will respect whatever you want to do or identify as, but when you try to say that your experience is the same as mine, when you've never had a penis, you've never come of age with a penis and going through the hormone process of being a male, you're not the same as me.
Right.
You can construct a fake penis all you want. If it makes you feel better, that's fine. You're not me. You're not the same as me. We're different. And that shouldn't be a controversial thing to say. It shouldn't be controversial to say that a trans man's a trans man and a man is a man and a trans woman's a trans woman and a woman is a woman. It's a different thing. But they want you to play this game of pretend where you need to see them as exactly the same as the other sex they're trying to identify as. And that's too far, man. It's too far.
Yeah, it's just catering to people's feelings. And, at what cost are you going to cater to people's feelings? Are you going to alter everything about reality just to make a very small minority of people feel like they're valid? Well, I think the problem, first of all, is nobody should be seeking validation from an outside source. That's something that you deal with personally.
Yeah, and the other thing that's interesting about that is that they don't often consider how they're invalidating, everyone else.
Exactly.
It's like you can say that, we need to consider the feelings of this 0.01% of the population.
They say we're erasing their experience, and then they turn around and erase
the
our
experience of everyone else. It's just, again, like self-awareness is a superpower.
It's like Elliot Page. You want to be Elliot Page? Great. Have fun with that. If you never had a dick, you have no idea what it's like to be a biological man. That is not a controversial thing to say. It is just a fact. And it's nuts that we live in a world right now where I can't say that without getting some kind of backlash or crucified morally. It's bizarre.
Yeah, it's really odd.
Well, what are you going to do? We're just going to have to keep going one day at a time, having these conversations.
Yeah.
I guess we're
putting it up. Wait, I wanted to ask Gothix. Are you playing any video games right now?
Yeah. We'll end on that.
The only video games I'm playing right now, I've been on a Zombie Army 4 binge. I love zombie games. I have been waiting for another game to come out. I think it's called, is it Hell? What is it called? Man, I forgot. I think it's called Hellsinger, I think. It's like a beats per minute type of game. It kind of looks like Doom. I love first person shooters and I love like horror games.
Brent likes Dead by Daylight.
Oh yeah, I mean, I got my DVD tattoo right here. Funny story about this.
You guys gotta play Dead by Daylight together.
funny story about this. I met the developers at TwitchCon, and one of them actually uploaded a photo of me with the tattoo on their social media. But when I started changing or vocalizing my opinions, they unfollowed me. They disassociated with me.
Oh my God.
And they're probably really disappointed. They're like, damn, she's still flashing that tattoo around in interviews and shit. People can't know that we are associated with her.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly, like, I still like the game, but I just think it's kind of shitty, but whatever.
Yeah, what are you gonna do?
To those developers, screw you guys.
Well, they're also like they do this thing in Dead by Daylight where they sort of import killers from other franchises. So I can understand why it would be important for them as a company to maintain this, liberal woke lefty.
Yes.
Because if they're trying to get, other corporations to interact with them and do business with them, they have to make sure that everything is seen as correct.
Yeah, you wouldn't want people to like get offended that you shared a picture of Gothix, you know, who supports your game about serial killers in which you hang people on hooks and kill them. There's nothing controversial about that.
Right?
Nothing.
It's so
Mm-mm.
bizarre.
Yeah.
I've been on a Fortnite kick lately.
Oh,
Yeah, I didn't play.
I
it
liked
for
you
much.
guys. I'm not sure anymore.
You're such a zoomer, Brent. What the hell? That's a very zoomer thing. Well, I'm not a gamer, so don't
Okay, I can't group you in. Okay.
group me in.
No,
I'm
he's the drummer
I'm
artist.
the book nerd, painter, drummer. So
Okay, very cool. Nice.
he's the gamer.
I'm the
you know.
gamer.
Nice. Nice.
I'm
Nice. And that's why.
obsessed with Star Citizen as the space game that I'm waiting for.
Oh, is that like a strategy game?
No, it's so it's like this weird sort of it's going to be like an MMORPG when it's done, but basically it's like a space game where you have it's also an FPS. So like your character is like a person, and then you can, you know, walk around the world, you can buy armor and weapons, and you can go and, you know, hop into a spaceship and then fly to a planet or a moon and then get out and do like a first person mission, or you can also do like cargo missions, or it's kind of like this, it's trying to be like the everything game basically, and it's in the I think the Amazon, I can't remember what engine, but it looks really pretty. It's a very beautiful game.
Nice.
Still in alpha. It's like I probably got like 5, it's been in development for like 10 years almost. It's probably going to be in development for another 5 to 10 years before it's like ready for release. But it's so pretty.
Well, it's a massive game, right?
Yeah, well, the idea is that it'll be massive. Like if you're familiar with EVE Online, it'll be similar to that when it's done, but it'll, instead of EVE just was like you're a ship basically, and you're like flying around the universe, and you could never actually like get out of the ship and like walk around. But in Star Citizen, that's what you can do. And there's different kinds of vehicles. There's not just spaceships. There's motorcycles and tanks and all kinds of things.
Nice.
Dork.
That's cool. Gonna have to check it out.
Yeah, if you like space, you're gonna like it, but it's expensive. That's the only thing. It's expensive, and you have to have like a really high sort of computer in order to run it well. It's pretty.
Okay. Cool.
All right, I guess we will let you go.
Thank you
Vanessa.
so much, Vanessa, for joining us.
Yeah, we
Thank you for having me. This was fun. Invite me back whenever. I'd love to chat with you guys more.
love to have you back. We very much love that.
Don't forget to check out Vanessa. You know, she's Gothix TV on YouTube. It's also, what is it on
Yeah.
Twitch?
What's your website?
On Twitch, it's Gothix. My website is gothix.tv. Everywhere else is Gothix TV.
Gothix.tv. Let me see.
Oh, and you're on Locals too.
Yes, I'm on Locals as well.
Gothix.
Yes.
Everywhere.
So be sure to follow her, check out her work. She's doing great things right now.
And I'll put everything in the description too.
Yeah, this episode will probably be out Sunday. We'll see. But
Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, do all the things.
share, all the stuff. The establishment hates us, so please help.
Thanks so much,
Yeah.
everyone. We'll be back again with
With
another
that,
one soon. Bye-bye.